great to see so many people here. We'll wait one more minute and then I'll go ahead and get us rolling with our introduction. It's wonderful to see some more folks coming in. We're about to start shortly here. Just one moment. Oh yeah, I'm seeing some names I recognize in this list. That's great. Oh, you're very welcome, Maria. We're really happy to provide captions. We feel lucky to be able to do that tonight. Excellent. All right, it is 6:02. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know Cole has a lot that he wants to cover tonight. So welcome. My name is Ellen Mueller. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the director of the MFA program at Minneapolis College of Art and Design, and we welcome you to our summer 2021 professional practices series. I'm going to start out with a visual description of myself in case anyone's participating with low vision. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair and brown eyes. I'm sitting in a studio office behind me, and I'm going to start out today by acknowledging the land that we are currently occupying here in Minneapolis. It is unceded territory, the ancestral homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. Gathering here, we pay our respects to the elders, both past and present. We acknowledge the grave harm that colonialism has brought to these lands, in particular the erasure of both Indigenous and African identities, not only during slavery, but also via racist laws that have segregated all people. We honor those who live and do live currently at the intersection of identity and experience. And if you'd like to learn more about land acknowledgements or learning about the land that you're currently on, please feel free to screenshot this slide. It's got some excellent links that you can explore. And for all of our attendees, we welcome you, and we want you to know that your audio and video will be muted, but later, if we have time for Q&A, we can unmute and engage in that way. And if you run into any technical difficulties tonight, we're joined by Pearl Davis, our technical support, and you can reach her at av_support at mcad.edu. Also, feel free to leave questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we can reference those at the end if we have time. A recording of this webinar will be made available after we are concluded, and you can find the full professional, I forgot to update our link. It's summer 2021 there, but you can find it on the MFA website, which I will share in just a moment. Also, we would be amiss if we did not thank all the wonderful people who make this possible. Thank you to Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez, our full-time visiting faculty member who arranges much of our technicalities with these. Kylie Van Note, Senior Administrative Assistant, it does a ton of paperwork for us. Seth Dahlside does a lot of the setup, as does Nikki Motocolum. And as I mentioned, Pearl Davis is with us this evening. And I should say the MCAD MFA program sponsors this event. You can find us at mcad-mfa.com, and that's where the rest of our speaker series is located if you want to find out what else is happening in June. We are a community of makers, thinkers, researchers, and creative professionals working in a mentor-based interdisciplinary program, so feel free to check it out. And without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Cole Seidl. Cole is a filmmaker, educator, and traveler, as well as an alum of the MFA program. He is a former professor of media studies at Al-Quds Bard College, am I pronouncing that right? Excellent, in Abu Dis, Palestine, and is currently teaching cinema and screen studies at Monroe Community College in Rochester, New York. And without any further ado, it is my pleasure to hand this over. I'm going to stop sharing now and hand this over to Cole.
Thank you. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to be here and talk. I sort of de facto instigated this recently. I was a as mentioned in the introduction, I was a professor of media studies at Al-Quds Bard College in the West Bank in Abu Dis. So I have very personal ties to Palestine. I have a very strong love of Palestine. And with recent news events, more so than the news events itself, but the continued media response to what was happening in Palestine, especially as a professor of media studies in Palestine, watching the media response to events in Palestine was incredibly frustrating, even more so sitting from abroad. So I sent some messages to institutions I have been affiliated with, and MCAD was the only one kind enough to offer an opportunity to speak or to engage with this issue a little bit more. The other thing I wanted to mention is I reached sort of a boiling point where I sent that initial message, but the thing about Palestine is that we do tend to only pay attention to it in America and in Europe when there are these violent flare-ups, of violence from the Western perspective, which is usually when Palestinians fight back. That's when we perceive as flare-ups of violence, because violence occurs every single day in Palestine. Living in Palestine is violence. Life is violence. Psychological, physical, economic violence, everything is violence there. But we really only look when we look at Hamas rockets, 99% of which do nothing. Right? These are the things that bring up conversations about Palestine. And there's a really wonderful article by Slavoj Žižek, who many of you in academia are probably aware of, called "What Goes On When Nothing Goes On." I'm here today not to talk a lot about Gaza, right? I don't know much about Gaza. I've never been there. I would love to see it someday. That's a dream of mine, but I have never been there. I don't know a lot about Gaza. And to be honest, I don't know a lot about what goes on when things go on. I haven't really been under fire in Palestine. I lived in Palestine when nothing goes on. I experienced the day-to-day when there were not regular violent flare-ups, but the normal everyday violence. So that's really what I'm here to talk about today, with my specific experience of teaching abroad. And I know some people here are interested in pursuing education as a faculty, as a teacher, teaching art. And so I'm going to try to talk about teaching abroad, teaching specifically abroad in Palestine, and even more specifically, teaching art abroad in Palestine. And to do that, I've invited a friend of mine, a former student of mine, Juman Tamimi, who you can see here. Juman was a student at Al-Quds Bard College, which I should explain. Al-Quds Bard College is a sort of partnership between Al-Quds University in the West Bank and Bard College in upstate New York. And students at Al-Quds Bard study in English. It's currently the only liberal arts program in the West Bank. And you graduate with 2 degrees, one from Al-Quds University and one from Bard College. And Juman was an interesting student because Juman was a human rights major and a media studies minor. Who took many classes with me, who excelled, I'm sure excelled at human rights, but I didn't teach those classes, so I don't know. But Juan has a degree in human rights and a lot of work in the realm of media studies. And I invited her for a few specific reasons, one of which is that dual background was, I think, particularly helpful. She can tell us a little bit more about what it's like to be a student in the West Bank from the student perspective. She's currently doing her master's degree in Galway in Ireland. So the time zone works out a little better, and she's continued in academia. And the last reason why I particularly wanted Juman to be here is she has a slight tie to MCAD in that in my digital media arts class, I pulled art from all over to introduce different concepts. And as we were doing digital video installations, I introduced some work by Ben Morin, a video installation artist, which Juman took as a jumping off point for video installations about human rights in the West Bank, which became her thesis project, which was excellent work. And so I felt that she was the right fit to be here to chat with us. So thank you for coming with Juman. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really my pleasure to be here today with you, Professor Cole, and with all of you. It's really such an honor to be a Palestinian here and just talk you through and have a talk about Palestine with Professor Cole, who wasn't an outsider for us. He literally he is a friend for us. We still talk to him. We still have him in our conversations, and we still ask him for advices and recommendations. So I'm really glad I'm invited, and I'm looking forward for this interesting talk.
Okay. Well, I'll talk really briefly about myself, about getting work abroad, to try to at least to touch on, for those of you who are interested in teaching abroad. I always knew I was interested in teaching abroad. That's why I enrolled at MCAD, right? I went to MCAD with the specific intention of becoming a professor in higher ed, hopefully outside of America. I say this from New York, but I had experience beforehand. I was an English teacher for 1.5 years in Taipei between undergrad and my grad school. I studied abroad. And so my first job right out of MCAD, I got some adjunct work in LA because I teach film, so it made sense. So I was teaching adjunct in LA, and coincidentally, I decided to try to learn Arabic because I thought it would be fun. So I was like, well, I'm gonna be in LA, I'll just learn some Arabic. So I started learning Arabic, Egyptian, and suddenly a job shows up in an Arabic-speaking country. And I went, cool, Palestine. I know a little bit about that. I thought. And so I applied on a whim. It was Bard College, which is relatively prestigious. So I went, I've got 1 year of adjuncting under my belt. Nothing will probably happen. Turns out not a lot of people are willing to pack up and move to the Middle East because they're scared. It's not convenient. There's not it's not Berlin, where there's this perception of a great arts culture going on. And so the opportunity, I got an interview, and a bit of advice I will give for those of you who want to teach is get out of America in your practice. Get out of America in your influences. Right? I'm quite confident that the reasons I have gotten the jobs I did was because I don't fill my syllabus with American artists. I fill them with Palestinian artists to this day. I teach at a community college in New York. I'm showing Palestinian films. I show I show feminist films from Belgium in the 1960s. I show African films. I show South American films. This is the thing that has, I think, helped me in the interview process. So I'll try not to take too much time here, but I take it on a whim. I say, yeah, it's a full-time job. Let's do it. I've got a bulldog. I've got to move. I've got my wife, but we're going to do it. So I go by myself and I land in Tel Aviv, come into Abu Dis, and I'm staying in a little apartment in Abu Dis near the university. My first week, there's some sort of armed conflict. My first Friday, I start hearing explosions. I start hearing shooting. I didn't know this, but Abu Dis is oftentimes one of the flashpoints of conflict in the West Bank. And this is because Abu Dis was essentially a suburb of Jerusalem until they built a giant wall cutting it off from the rest of Jerusalem. So Abu Dis, I can share a screen. I can show you a little bit of what Abu Dis looks like. Whoops, that's the wrong button. Let me stop sharing. Sorry about that. I thought I had everything together. So here we go. This right here is Jerusalem in the distance, and this right here is Abu Dis. The university's right over here to the right. You take this service. It's called a service. It's a van. You fill up. You get in it. I lived in Bethlehem, and I rode to work. And then you come right over here to the front gate of the university. My first week of teaching, I believe the first week of teaching, I come on campus and I see this, and I don't know what I'm looking at. And I go on, and I hear some like commotion, and turn around, I get hit in the face with a cloud of something. I start tearing up. I realize I've gotten hit with a cloud of tear gas. I ask students, I don't think I asked Shuman, but I ask whatever students are in my class. I say, what do they want? What's happening? My students go, oh, it's first week of class. They do that at the beginning of the year. It's a welcome back, sort of remember who's in charge situation, right? So this is a regular occurrence, right? I got hit with tear gas twice in 1 year, which is apparently pretty easy. The other faculty told me that the previous year was much worse. Right? Education is a primary target for the occupying forces, the Israelis. They come in and the goal is to make education difficult, to make you not want to go anymore, to try to keep you from making the journey. One way they do that is by regularly just reminding you who's in charge, coming on campus, taking equipment, taking computers, tear gassing students, tear gassing professors. The less professors you have, the harder it is to maintain an academic institution. Turnover is very high for foreign professors in Palestine, even Palestinian professors in Palestine, because not a lot of the professors live in Abu Dis. They live in Bethlehem, they live in Ramallah, they live in Hebron. And it's kind of miserable sometimes to get to campus. One of the reasons for that, I don't know if I put the picture here. One of the reasons for that is there's a checkpoint you have to go through on the way to campus. I experienced it from Bethlehem. Juman may have experienced this a little bit differently. But in Bethlehem, you ride in the service, you go down a valley. It's a 10-minute drive from Bethlehem to Abu Dis, but the wall means you can't get there. So you can't go through Jerusalem, so you have to go the long way around through what's called Wadi Nar, which translates to the Valley of Fire. You go around, and then there's a checkpoint, a container. And the point of this container is to separate the citizens of Ramallah from the citizens of Bethlehem, to make it hard for Palestinians to get together in a short period of time. And so every day you drive through that checkpoint. Sometimes you get stopped, sometimes you do not. You don't know, it's random. If I'm driving a car, oftentimes me, looking like I do, driving a car with Israeli plates, because I could rent a car in Israel and then drive it into the West Bank, not technically legally, but I could do it. And they would often just wave me through. If I looked differently, that might be a different situation, right? And I cannot reiterate enough, it's because there's a very clear apartheid system functioning here. And so, yeah, this checkpoint becomes an everyday occurrence. I often had students coming to class saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't, right? Because the thing I always made fun of, my joke, my fun, morbid joke was always that in America, if you're a hunter, I come from a hunting family in North Minnesota, right? If you're a hunter, the first thing they teach you when you get your license to hunt, your gun safety permit, is you never point the barrel of a gun at anybody ever. And Israel, with supposedly the best trained military ever, seems to have been taught, point your gun at everybody all the time. Tourists, anybody, the barrel goes in their face. And you can imagine how exhausting it is having to get a barrel of a gun pointed at you every time you want to go to class. And these are the types of things that I, as a teacher, had to learn to contend with, right? It sucks when a student walks into class 35 minutes late, but you don't know why they're 35 minutes late. You don't know how many guns were just pointed at them while they were interrogated, just trying to bother to show up to class. And these are the things that make traditional higher education near impossible under the current context when nothing's going on, when there is no flare-up of violence. Juma, I'll open it to you for a minute because you might have a different experience and you had more years of experience going through these checkpoints than I did.
Yeah, I know it's a usual thing for us that for a moment we started thinking this is the normal life of just moving from one city to another. For me, I had to cross 2 checkpoints every day to go to my college. Like it's a 1 hour and 15 minutes drive. And transportation, regardless of the drive itself and all the struggles we face, but transportation itself also like is a struggle. So I guess the main thing for the road, if we're talking about our road trips to our colleges, which is supposed to be easy and supposed to be a normal thing we all do. Sometimes we just decide not to go to college just because I don't want to do this today. I just don't want to go for a 1-hour trip and face soldiers who might not be in a good mood today. They might just keep us for half an hour for nothing, asking for our IDs and asking why we're going or where we're going. So this is, at some point, it gets to be, okay, we're used to this. We have to go through this. But at some point, if you really think about it, it gets to be, why should I do this? Especially if you really go outside Palestine for a quite short time, and you realize how easy life is, how easy transportation is, how easy and fun going to college might be, or being on a campus. I remember the year before Professor Cole came to college, it was literally the most, like, I don't even know how to put it into words, but we literally knew that every Mondays and Wednesdays are the evacuation days, where the 2 p.m. class, we will never get to the 2 p.m. class. We even started, like, it's a sad joke, but we even started not preparing for the class because anyways, we're not gonna attend it. Around 1:30 to 2 p.m., we start hearing the gas bombs, and we start hearing the soldiers getting into college. We already, especially on Wednesdays, because it is the last day of the weekend for Abu Dis or Al-Quds Bard was Thursdays and Fridays. So on Wednesdays, because most of us live not in Abu Dis, like most of the people attending Al-Quds University or Al-Quds Bard College are not from Abu Dis. They are from all over Palestine, from Hebron, Nablus, from West Bank, and from the 48 lands and Jerusalem. So we literally come from all around Palestine. Some of us have to cross even more than 2 checkpoints. Some of us have to go for 3 hours road trip, not for 1 hour as I am. So it's different. Like, if you ask Palestinians, we all have different experience with this, and it's weird. We all come from the same place, but yet it's not the same place for all of us. And I remember that semester, like, we literally didn't get the knowledge and the skills we're supposed to get, and we even started to count those courses as passed just because we can't do anything about it. Like, now it's even, I guess, I'm talking to my friends from Abu Dis right now, and they are having online classes because of COVID. Low-key, you guys are lucky. You don't have to go all the way to Abu Dis, and so it's really, it's the sad joke of our, like, daily lives. So yeah, even if I want to talk about it the whole night for me, because it's 12 a.m. here, but it wouldn't be enough. But yes, the only thing I would say, it's really different, and you wouldn't ever realize how different and how easy life might be only if you just leave the city for a while and just come back and see how life is hard and how normal daily tasks are really such struggles. So that's what would I say about this.
Yeah, thank you. As somebody who was an advisor of students at the same time, who often coordinated your study abroad programs, which were difficult in and of themselves bureaucratically, because the thing you have to keep in mind, a large number of Palestinians are officially stateless. They do not have citizenship anywhere. Some of my students lived in Jerusalem. Jerusalemites had a particularly unique situation where they had an Israeli passport that says not a citizen of Israel. You can't get visas in that passport oftentimes. Or they may have a Jordanian passport that says not a citizen of Jordan. I had students that applied, got accepted to a study abroad program. And by the time, but then they'd go send us and they go, where are you a citizen of? And they go, well, Palestine. And they go, that's not a country. What do you want us to do? And they go, well, I can send you my Israeli passport. You send that and they go, this isn't a valid passport. It says you're not a citizen here. And they'd spend the entire semester that they should be abroad trying to get the visa worked out. They'd get visa approval the day their flight returns from abroad. I had many students who couldn't get abroad. And then the students who could get abroad would come back, and it's home, but there's this shell shock of going to Finland, for example. Finland has a really great media school. So I have a lot of students who go to Finland. Finland has this specific law called like right to the land, where you can walk anywhere at any time. You can sleep in somebody's backyard. It's your country. You have a right to movement. Palestine, right to movement is a major issue. You can't move. You can't, there's curfews. They'll come and say, you can't go out of your house. A foreign military will come and say, you can't come out of your house tonight, right? This idea of being able to move is greatly restricted. And so I want to mention a couple other things as we talk about education here. Here's a few pictures of Al-Quds University, really a beautiful campus. These are a couple students. These were my first ever thesis graduates. Both did amazing projects of film and an entire exhibition. This is one of the cafeteria buildings. This is the medical campus, and then this is one of the water features. It really is a beautiful campus when you're there, the right weather, the right time. I really loved being on campus, despite the fact that you had to be gone by 3 p.m. because they locked everything down. And if you didn't leave on time, you were stranded and you had to like hitchhike to try to find somebody going the way you were going. Probably easier if you spoke Arabic better than I did, because I was bad at calling taxi drivers. So this is what my memories of the campus. But recently, a few weeks ago, I had to go on Instagram and see these pictures of our campus. This is, keep in mind, when you look at the media, the Hamas-Israel fighting. But this is the West Bank, where Hamas is not in control. This is a college campus where during our student elections, not a single representative from Hamas ran, right? This is not a Hamas base. This is an educational institution. Why are educational institutions being targeted, right? It's a key factor in apartheid. It has consistently been a key factor in apartheid. You always attack education. It's a clear MO. And it seems weird why educational institutions. This is where students are, and students are radical. They're politically engaged. They still have their spirit. They haven't been broken down yet. They're willing to fight. They're angry. And the interesting thing about this last bit of fighting is the young people seem to be leading this charge. The young people particularly, and this is the funny thing about my job in the West Bank, is I was a media studies professor, and it felt a little bit superfluous. Not that it's a stupid thing to teach, it's a wonderful thing to teach, but every Palestinian student I had was so miles beyond any American student I've had when it comes to media literacy. Because you can't grow up with your life politicized to this degree without having a razor sharp understanding of the way media manipulates, the way media distorts, and the way media lies. And what I love about this, it's a sad thing, but what I love about this is I've seen people my students' age, younger people, waging a media campaign via social media recently that does, from my perspective of somebody sitting here in America, I am seeing tides change on the narrative of Palestinian resistance for the first time in my lifetime. And it's because of that razor sharp sort of media literacy of the Palestinians that they're learning that Israel's best weapon, they attack the campuses, they use violence, they use bombs, but their best weapon traditionally has been the media. It's been their ability to distort narratives and public perceptions. It's been the conflation of criticism of a government with anti-Semitism. right? These tools, these rhetorical strategies are incredibly strong, and to this day still incredibly powerful. But we're starting to see a shift on that because everybody's got a phone. You can't, there's only so many atrocities that get filmed before you can't, similar to what we saw in Minneapolis with George Floyd. At a certain point, you can't cover things up anymore. There's too many people documenting it. And this has been something that that's really a beacon of light, I guess, coming out of this situation, is seeing the way that the young people in Palestine, from my perspective, no longer being there, are pushing back. And the other thing I want to talk about is the way that Israeli universities or Israel targets education. I'm not there anymore, and this was my favorite job I've ever had. I just want to point that out. I loved working in Palestine. I wake up in the middle of the night every night, just go like flailing and wake up my wife because I just think about how mad I am that I'm not there right now. I loved the job, and I'm not there because you can't stay. You just can't stay. There's no way to do it. I came in on a tourist visa, officially not allowed to work because Israel controls the borders. Palestine cannot give visas. And Israel will not give you a visa. You will probably be deported if you tell them you're planning on going and teaching at a university there. If they find out, so I disabled my Facebook. I made it private. I made my Instagram private. I learned very quickly, shut up. Don't, only my closest friends knew I lived in Palestine. Many people to this day still don't know I've ever been there because I didn't talk about it. And now, there's this thing, I walk around, I'll wear a keffiyeh around Rochester, New York. I've got a big Palestinian flag in front of my house, and I can't shut up about it. But, you know, a year of feeling like you can't say the word really comes out once you like, I need to talk about it all the time because if word got out that, well, this was why I was here, I could be deported like that. And there were professors at our university that got deported. The year I was there, there was a huge exodus of professors being deported from Birzeit University, which is what this article is referring to. They specifically try to make sure that it's difficult to get an education and that it's hard to recruit because you know that you're taking a huge risk when you go there. I brought my dog there and I had to constantly go, what happens if I get deported while my dog's still at home? Can I get him? What will happen? Who will take care of him, right? These are the questions that you're constantly dealing with. And so when a full-time tenure track thing shows up and you're like, well, it pays better, I don't have to worry about what happens in 2 years, right? You end up leaving. There's some material circumstances that make it difficult for education. And the last thing I want to say about this is it's not just in the West Bank. We see it in the United States through lobbying firms. We see it through, right, Students for Justice in Palestine is the biggest student organization in America criticizing Israel, and they're constantly being challenged. They're trying to be shut down. Brooklyn College, which is where a lot of my current students transfer to, they had a Students for Justice in Palestine event and they were criticized. They ended up settling with a Zionist organization because they didn't admit any wrongdoing, but they admitted it looked anti-Semitic to criticize Israel publicly on campus. And there was no way they could deny that, despite the fact that nobody would, consider criticism of Boko Haram racist, right? The logic only applies with criticism to Israel because of their mastery of narrative manipulation. But we see this all the time in the US. The ethnic studies curriculum in California just recently was held up by APEC particularly, and was re-put through with any reference to Palestine removed from the curriculum. And in Florida, students who were criticizing Israel were attacked for anti-Semitism, right? This is something we see in America too. It's not just they attack education of Palestinian Americans. Flint, Michigan has one of the largest Palestinian diaspora populations in the world, but the Palestinians in America are sometimes quite quiet about it. There was a Palestinian restaurant just down the street from me that was called El Petra, which is in Jordan. There's posing as a Jordanian restaurant. I started talking to the lady a little bit in Arabic, and she said, "Oh, I'm Palestinian." But Palestinians often don't present as Palestinian because their very existence is politicized. And it's not worth losing the customers. It's not worth fighting your way through 4 years of college here. So they do attack outside of just traditional Palestinian education institutions.
And what I would like to comment on this, Professor Cole, as well, that it's not only about this direct approach of targeting educational institutions or colleges or universities or articles or professors. It's also one thing that really bothers me whenever I think about it is Palestinians in Jerusalem or in the 1948 who want to study at Israeli universities. That's really super hard for them to do that. They are supposed to go through a really super hard exam that they are required to get a super high score in it in order for them to study at Israeli universities. And most likely they will fail the first time and they will have to repeat it again. And that's only applicable to Palestinians. Like Israelis who just finished high school, they are not required to go through that exam, only Palestinians. And the reason why this always stops me is my cousin is the same age as I am. She lives in Jerusalem, and until now, I am finishing my MA degree, and she's still in her third year. Just because she had to do the exam twice, and she has to do multiple procedures that are only, I can say it's systematic apartheid. And this is maybe we Palestinians, or like maybe whenever we talk about Palestine, we just try to shed light on those direct or highlighted issues of apartheid in the West Bank, in Gaza, but we don't really know much, even we Palestinians, or like at least I will talk for myself. I didn't know until the last events that happened that people in the 1948 lands and in Jerusalem do suffer at least as much as Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza do. So it was really good to know through the last events, the campaign that happened online. It was so useful because now it was not under anybody's control. However, there was a great censorship on the people, on the accounts of those who are talking about Palestine. Even if you use the word Palestine, the word Jerusalem, the word save, the Palestinian flag, the reach on your social media accounts or platforms won't be the same at all. I tried it myself. If you use the Israeli flag on one story and on the other story you use Palestinian flag, this one will reach, but the other one will not. That's because there is a great censorship on freedom of expression. If we talked about freedom of movement before, we're now talking about freedom of expression. And this was one of the things that Palestinian filmmakers or artists really suffer from. If you're doing your film, you're doing it and that's it. It won't go anywhere. You don't know what you're gonna do with it. So that's why I guess the film industry is not as rich as it's supposed to be. It's not like a normal thing to say Palestinian film. It would be like an odd phrase to say. So this even though they have censorship over films, all the films have to go under certain committees to approve the film in order to go on like online or on TV. But that's the thing. Now, if you're posting on social media, they might control you. But if we all post on social media, that would be less under their control. So I'm really proud of the campaign that happened recently, and I believe we shouldn't stop as Palestinians and everyone outside Palestine, because the censorship in Palestine is more effective than outside. I am in Ireland. My posts reach, and I can talk for my people in Palestine more than they can post. Like they post get deleted. At least mine didn't. My post haven't got deleted. However, the same post got deleted in Palestine. So this is just what I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, thank you. I actually didn't know about what it's like for Jerusalemites to study at Israeli universities. I hadn't ever even thought about it. And one other thing I want to talk about is something I just saw today is on an iPhone. If you look at the image search thing, if you type in, if you decide to search an image and you type Palestine into your search and you click enter, it'll say no search results, which is interesting. But if you type Israel and you hit search, you get a whole bunch of images. So our technology is systematically designed to silence talk about this. They don't want people talking about this. So let's talk about art, right? Since Juman brought us there perfectly, talking about Israel and the way that they censor Palestinian films. The movie Jenin Jenin, a documentary, was recently banned in Israel. It was scrubbed from the internet and people kept re-uploading it to different clandestine sites. And keep in mind, we talk a lot at MCAD about like the sustainability of being an artist, trying to make a living at it. Palestinians are just trying to get people to actually see it without it being scrubbed from the face of the earth. So, I mean, the difficulty of making a career of it is secondary to just even being able to make it. So a couple examples of the types of censorship of art you'll see is in 1967, Israel de facto banned the Palestinian flag and any depictions of it in art and media. It was enforced strategically to target Palestinian art and culture. You can look it up on B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. They talk about Military Order 101. This eventually expanded to a ban of Palestinian artworks, which even dared to include the colors of the Palestinian flag, which is a bit silly. So one of the considered often called the artist of the first Intifada is a guy named Silman Mansour. I forgot to capitalize his name. Sorry about that. He had an exhibition that was forcibly closed by the Israeli authorities, and he was arrested for violating this order because his art was political in nature. And so then this happens, they ban the flag, and then people start painting with the colors of the flag. They ban the colors of the flag, and you start seeing artwork like this by Silman Mansour. This one's called Bride of the Homeland from 1976. And if you look here, I put a little Palestinian flag. You can see we are pictorially starting to represent the Palestinian flag by conveniently making the grass blue instead of green, by making the arrow black or gray, purple instead of red. We're messing with colors to pictorially represent the blood is no longer red. We're moving away from the colors and the actual representations of the flag, but still resisting. This is Palestinian art is often made the way it is specifically as an act of resistance against a system that's telling them what they can and cannot create. Literally, what they can and cannot create. Silman Mansour is probably the most famous example of this. This painting in particular is really famous. And I really love it actually. But and this information I'm kind of stealing almost wholesale from one of my colleagues at Al-Quds Bard College at the time, Lara Khaldi, who is a curator. She's a museum curator, and I'll talk about her a little bit more, but she's done a lot of work with Palestinian art and specifically resistance art and the way art and art curation is resistance in Palestine. But I learned a lot of what I learned about Palestinian art straight from just conversations with her in the office. So I don't really have a citation, but it's from Lara Khaldi. And I just posted this because I just saw this the other day. May 30th, just a couple days ago, this kid was detained with the bullet, barrel of the gun pointed straight at him because he was riding his bicycle through Jerusalem and he had a Palestinian flag on his bicycle. This law was never revoked. It's still technically there. It's like a blue law that can be strategically enforced for the sake of holding down the people you want to hold down and letting go of the people you want to let go. It's enforced when it needs to be enforced on a case-by-case basis. And apparently this child was one of the cases in which it needed to be enforced. So because of the colors of the Palestinian flag being banned, they were told that a watermelon is also a symbol of political incitement. So because of this, watermelons have become a symbol of resistance in Palestine. You'll often see watermelons with little Palestinian flags in it. You'll see Palestinian artists working with Palestinian art. There's a lot of going with watermelons, and they've become, but these are not organic. I mean, they are organic in a way, but they're specifically cultivated as acts of resistance because of the way art is strategically attacked in Palestine. You attack education so that there's no way to better your life, and you attack art, which makes life worth living, right? These are two classic modes of apartheid that you can see perfect mirrors of in South Africa. That's the exact same way that they targeted these institutions in South Africa during the original definition of apartheid. Original. It's silly. This has been going since 1948. Right. And the other one I want to talk about is Elias Suleiman, my favorite Palestinian filmmaker. Made this film Divine Intervention in 2002. And here's an article from The Guardian. When Elias Suleiman brought his film to Ramallah, he found that the Israeli soldiers had got there first. The entrance to the cinema had been bombed, the cash till rifled, the Dolby stereo stolen. Right? They stormed the premiere of the main, probably the most famous, internationally famous Palestinian filmmaker, Elias Suleiman. They stormed his film premiere because they attack art systemically. One thing I think is worth pointing out, the theater in Ramallah, as far as I'm aware, and Juman can correct me on this if I'm wrong, is the only current movie theater in the entire West Bank. There used to be one in Jenin that closed down a few years before I was there. There's an area in Bethlehem called Cinema Square, but there's no cinema in that square.
Yeah.
So for me, when I wanted to see a movie, I walked to the checkpoint, walked through, took an Arab bus to downtown Jerusalem, and then took a different bus to go to the Jerusalem Cinematheque or one of the multiplexes, which are just, standard multiplexes you see. But I never saw a movie in a theater in the West Bank because the only one was in Ramallah, which was a hassle. You had to go through checkpoints to get there. It was a long ride, and it was more expensive, oddly enough. So, yeah.
Just very recently, colleges started to screen some films just to make it, to make the small version of cinemas, because I don't think even if we tried to open a cinema, that wouldn't be easy in different cities in the West Bank. Like colleges like Dar al-Kalima in Bethlehem, where Professor Cole lived, they low-key have a schedule for screening films every week or every month. They even proposed, or they have now the Palestine film days, where they screen a lot of films of like Palestinian films that worth watching, that all Palestinians should know about. And this is something that really interests me as a Palestinian, first of all, and then as a Palestinian filmmaker. Like, why I am, as a Palestinian, do not really know about Palestinian films or like Palestinian filmmakers. The first time I really got to know that, we really have films, or we do have filmmakers, is in my second or third year in college, literally when Professor Cole came, and we started watching and taking those classes about the history of film and cinema. And then I realized, okay, we don't have an industry. It's not a large industry, but we have something we can show why we Palestinians don't know about it in the first place. And if we don't know about it, how can we project this to other people around the world? So that one of the reasons that made me, even that I know it's not a good career to go to as a Palestinian who aims to live in Palestine in the future. But I really wanted to focus on making more films and on making more fictional films, not documentary films, because I want to bring in Professor Lara Khaldi as well here, because one of the sentences that in the classes I took with her was, unfortunately, Israel, again, was smart enough to allow us to make films, but documentary films, not fiction films. They took over the fiction films, the industry of fiction films, and they let us be or do as documentary films as we do, because the truth, or if you really want to to plant some kind of facts or truth in anyone around the world, you will just give them a fiction piece to watch. Because if they watch a documentary film that they most likely won't complete or won't watch from the first place, they will know that, this film is telling me 1, 2, 3, is telling me those facts. I might take them or leave them. But fiction films don't really tell you, this is what I'm trying to tell you. They just tell you, and you get to know them by yourself. So this is one point I really want to work on as a Palestinian filmmaker. I try to focus on fiction films. However, it's easy to make documentary, and all the films that we have watched as students under Palestinian Cinema were documentary films. Like, we barely watched fiction films, and whenever I watch a fiction film, like, they whether were shot in Jerusalem or in the 1948 lands, and that's kind of frustrating because I'm from Hebron. I don't have access to those places. Like, it's really hard for me to have access. So would I be a successful filmmaker if I just shot my film in Hebron, for example, or in some random street in Ramallah or Bethlehem? Or should I always stick to the Western concepts, or talk about the Western ideas, or film in the Western, the places that look Western, like the Jaffa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem? So that really stopped me, and that really as well pushes me every time I ask myself why I have even left Palestine to learn filmmaking.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to I'll speed through a couple last points because I've got one. But one other example here in Bethlehem, right near where I used to live, Emily Jassir, who did make a fiction film in the West Bank, partly, called Wajib. She's a Palestinian filmmaker. She came back, she built this art center called Dar Emily Jassir. And during a few weeks ago, they ransacked the place, broke the media equipment, and this was a community learning center. This was to help cultivate more of a film industry, and it's a strategic target. So what I was going to say here is the reason I'm coming to MCAD is we're an arts institution, we're an educational institution, and I can tell you, I mean, these are just some examples. We can talk about the way that arts and education are targeted, but we're people that need to value that, and we're Americans. And I often had a little bit of, in the back of my mind, I taught at Bard. I got paid by Bard College in New York. And I go, I'm here helping, but I'm still paying US taxes, which are going right back to Israel. So me being here helping does also continue to help finance Israel. And so people often, one of the things I want to say about teaching abroad, teaching people from another culture, is that I believe in multicultural exchange. I believe in engaging with people of other cultures. I believe in, as an American, talking with Palestinians. But I believe it only works when it's dialectical in nature, right? When there's a power imbalance, it's difficult, right? Me as the professor coming in and saying this is right, from my cultural perspective, kind of puts a little bit of a power behind it, right? I'm the professor. And I had to work really hard to try to make sure I'm not imposing my Western American male perspective on Palestinian students. I want to make sure I'm not colonizing Palestine through education as they're being literally colonized by the Israeli army. And I don't have a good answer to that, but it's something that's on my mind. It's something that concerns me about, I'm showing you films that I think are worth studying to build a Palestinian film industry, but I'm coming from a Western perspective, right? And we do this also as institutions when we ask to help. We say, like, this is horrible. How can we help Palestine? And the Palestinians consistently tell us the answer, and we go, I don't like that answer. And this is us using our power in the West to deny the reality. We say, how can we help? How can we help? How can we help? The answer is consistently boycott. A boycott of Israel, a strategic, economic, academic, and cultural boycott of Israel is the way forward. And we go, it doesn't feel good to me. And so we're going to not do that. And to me, that is a form of neocolonialism. And I understand that this is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly fraught politically. It's incredibly dangerous to the people who do it. There are currently 0 schools in the United States who have agreed to an academic boycott of Israel. There's a big fat goose egg. But I am seeing the tide start to shift in the media narrative. And I do think that schools like MCAD have to be on the forefront of this. I know I'm just trying not to push you guys too hard here, but MCAD does, places like MCAD, Arts Institute, people that care about artists, people that care about art, and people that genuinely care about education have to be on the forefront of this. An academic cultural boycott of Israel is the way forward. I went into Palestine thinking BDS was stupid. I honestly did. I got there going, sure, that'll work. I'll not buy Sabra hummus. Ooh, that'll show them. And the longer I was there, the more I realized it's a genuine threat. They do not like this for a reason, and it's because it's politically effective. And it has not been politically possible because of the narratives. But as the narratives start to shift, some of us are going to have to take bold steps. And so I would like to gently encourage us to understand that how can we help? Unfortunately, the answer is an academic and cultural boycott, in my opinion, and in the majority of Palestinian academics' opinion, and in the majority of Palestinian artists' opinion, including Lara Khaldi, who is wonderful. Her husband, Yazan Khalili, who is a wonderful installation artist. If you want some more links, there's againstapartheid.com, which is an artist cooperative, or a group of artists arguing about arguing for a boycott, specifically from the arts context. The culturalboycott.org, which kind of outlines the way that a strategic boycott can be done. And Lara Khaldi and Yazan Khalili, my former co-workers, were 2 of the signatories on this call to action against MoMA, who consistently deals with Israel and Israeli institutions, demanding that MoMA stop doing that, because they're allowed to continue doing this with impunity because we continue to let them. And the Palestinians can't boycott. All their imports are controlled by Israel. Everything is controlled by Israel. It is a one-state solution currently. Israel controls everything. And so they do need other people to do this. And so that's my big inflammatory final statement for the night. And I know it's like 2 minutes left, but I'm happy to answer questions. I hope Juman's happy to answer a few questions if you have time and you would like to. I know it's late.
I think we've got time for one, Cole. Thank you so much. I'll take the first one that came up here in our chat. It's from Dan McAvey. He asked, how would you suggest that an American hoping to teach abroad prepare for the different levels of freedom that might exist when working in another country or context?
Yeah. I don't know that I have a good answer there for how to prepare for it. What I do say is, do research beforehand. I tried to research Palestine as much as possible. I tried to talk to people who are from there as much as possible. But I would say, you're going to have to keep an open mind, and you're going to have to be extremely flexible, more so than is traditional in teaching. Teaching in the US, you can't think you know what you know, right? There's a lot that you aren't going to know going in, and you have to trust your students to teach you to an absurdly high degree, right? It almost felt a little selfish because I was getting paid to live in Palestine and learn, I'm sure, more than my students learned, because I got to take knowledge from them. But you just really have to go as a learner first and an educator second. I don't mean in terms of priority, but I mean, you can't educate well if you're completely unfamiliar with the context in which you're teaching. I had to become familiar with the idea of what colonialism looks like in order to teach properly in a colonial environment.
Wonderful. Yeah,
go
ahead, Juman.
I would add just one thing. I agree on all of you just said, Professor Cole. I would just say, when you're in Palestine, try to live in one of the places that in the West Bank, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in Ramallah. Try not to live in Tel Aviv and those places. Be with the people and trust them to teach you as well. This is one of the best forms that may really give you the best impression about Palestinians and how to deal with everything's happening there.
Yeah, and I would say anywhere, right? If you're teaching in Kashmir, if you're teaching wherever you're teaching, be with the people you're teaching. Don't be a tourist who comes in and teaches from an outside perspective. Ellen, I want to answer Maria's question really briefly.
Go for it. Go for it.
There's of course a bunch of nuance to gender, but the thing I want to point out is part of that Israeli media narrative is the Saudi Arabia-fying of the rest of the Middle East. Palestine is not Saudi Arabia. The hijab is not mandatory. 70% of Beit Jala is Christian. Bethlehem is 50% Christian. There are many atheists. There's a great deal of difference. My wife lived there with me. She worked there. It's a very secular country. And so specifically how it would differ for a woman teaching in an Arab country, it's gonna drastically depend on the Arab country. And so I'd say really make sure you know what you're getting into, because different countries have completely different cultures regarding gender norms. But Palestine is not going to feel as much different as people tend to think it does.
Thank you so much for your generosity and staying a little bit after. I really appreciate it. I'm sure all of our guests do as well. Do take a chance to look at the chat. There's a really nice, yes, and I see some clapping emojis out there. So thank you. If anybody wants I was just going to say, leave any comments for our amazing guests. Please feel free. And I just can't express enough gratitude. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to send you a message on Instagram and we can talk a little bit more.
Okay.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye.